I was wiping down table 7 when the daughter who robbed me walked into the diner laughing at my downfall, and in that instant, every bruise on my heart began throbbing again. My name is Marlene Hayes. I am 62 years old, and I never imagined that after a lifetime of honest work, I would be wearing a polyester uniform in a noisy San Diego diner just to survive. But life has a way of stripping you down to the bone, especially when the betrayal comes from the very people you once carried in your arms. Harbor Point diners smelled of coffee, burnt toast, and the endless churn of life. I had been here for 5 weeks, learning how to move fast enough to keep up with the rush, how to smile when my knees ached, and how to swallow my pride every time a stranger snapped their fingers at me. This was not the life I planned. My late husband, Owen, and I once owned Hayes Marina Rentals, a small business that kept us comfortable, not rich but steady. After he died, I thought my daughter Lily and her husband Brent were helping me manage the paperwork I could barely see through my grief. Instead, they slid documents under my pen, documents that transferred the business, our small waterfront home, and every remaining account into their names. They told me it was temporary. They told me it was for tax purposes. They told me they were protecting me. And in my fog of mourning, I believed them. When I realized what they had done, the marina was already listed as theirs. The accounts closed, and I was left with nothing but a retirement check that barely covered my food. Lily said I was overreacting. Brent said I should be grateful. They both said it was time for me to learn to live smaller. I couldn't find the strength to fight. I found a room to rent, took the first job the employment center offered, and started over at an age when most people dream of slowing down. On my 3rd morning at the diner, I met him, Victor Hale. He came in precisely at 11:45 every day and sat at the corner booth near the window. He looked fragile, almost delicate, with silver hair and a posture that suggested the weight of years pressing down. He always ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, a cup of tea and a slice of sourdough toast. Nothing more. He ate slowly, stretching each bite as though he didn't know when he might have another meal. His hands trembled when he lifted the mug, and yet his eyes clear, sharp blue missed nothing. I noticed him the way people who are hurting notice each other. One afternoon, when he seemed especially drained, I quietly shared half of my sandwich with him. His eyes filled with something deeper than gratitude, something like recognition. "Thank you, Miss Hayes," he whispered. "Kindness is rare these days." It startled me that he knew my name, but I let it pass. I was too tired to question anything. Still, sometimes I caught him watching the door, scanning faces, as though expecting someone familiar. And once, just once, I saw him slip a small leather notebook back into his coat the moment he noticed me looking. That was the first sign that Victor was not what he seemed. Victor and I settled into a quiet rhythm that became the calmest part of my day. Every morning I tied my apron, rubbed the stiffness out of my fingers, and waited for the clock to hit 11:45. And right on time, Victor would shuffle through the door with his careful steps, nod politely at the hostess, and take his usual place by the window. Sometimes I wondered if he came for the toast, or if he came for the conversation, though he never said much. He spoke slowly, selectively, like every word cost him something he could not afford to waste. Over time, he began sharing small pieces of himself. He told me his wife, Judith, had passed 3 years earlier after a long illness. He mentioned 2 children, Charlotte and Mason, who lived somewhere in Northern California but seldom visited. He always softened his voice when he said their names, as though they were distant memories he still carried like heavy stones. Whenever I gently asked what he did before retirement, he brushed it off with a vague answer about business consulting, then changed the subject. I learned not to push. There were other oddities. A black sedan sometimes parked across the street during lunch hours. I assumed it belonged to a customer from one of the nearby shops until I noticed the driver never left the vehicle. He would sit there, sunglasses on, hands still, gaze fixed on the diner entrance. The strange thing was that Victor never looked at him directly, but I could tell he was aware of the sedan each time it appeared. His shoulders tightened. His eyes flicked toward the window. The tremor in his hands grew stronger. One afternoon, when the lunch rush overwhelmed us, I barely touched my meal break. Victor noticed. He watched me weave between tables with a sympathetic frown, and when I brought his tea, he pushed his plate toward me. "Eat something," he murmured. "You look worn thin." "I will later," I said. "Busy day." He hesitated, then spoke in a voice so soft I almost missed it. "People who work themselves to the bone. They are often the ones nobody cares about until it's convenient. The remark cut deeper than it should have. I wasn't sure if he was talking about himself or me. Maybe both. That day, when he saw me unwrap my small packed lunch between orders, he shook his head. "Share it with me," he said. "Please." I slid half my sandwich toward him. The gratitude in his eyes startled me. They glistened, almost breaking. "No one has shared a meal with me in a long time," he whispered. I realized then that Victor wasn't just lonely, he was fractured in ways he didn't discuss. And yet, certain moments made me feel like he was studying me, searching for something he hadn't found in others. As I wiped the counter later, he asked quietly, "Marlene, do you think people who choose greed can ever find their way back to humanity?" Before I could answer, the black sedan door opened, and a tall man in a dark suit stepped out and walked straight toward the diner. The tall man pushed through the diner door with a calm, unsettling confidence. He didn't look around, didn't bother pretending he was there for food. His eyes went straight to Victor's table with the precision of someone fulfilling a task he didn't particularly enjoy. Victor didn't lift his head. He only tightened his fingers around his teacup, as though bracing for an impact no one else could see. The man stopped beside Victor, leaned down, whispered something too quietly for me to hear, then slipped a business card under Victor's saucer. Victor gave the smallest nod, not of agreement but acknowledgement. The man left just as quietly as he came. No food ordered. No words exchanged with anyone else. I stood frozen behind the counter, but Victor pretended as though nothing unusual had happened. He continued slicing his toast into neat, fragile squares. Whatever that moment meant, it wasn't meant for me. At least, not yet. I didn't have time to dwell on it because the bell over the door chimed again and my stomach dropped. Lily swept inside with the confidence of someone who believed the world existed solely for her convenience. She wore designer sunglasses, a perfectly tailored cream jumpsuit, and that same smirk she used the day she told me I needed to accept my new station in life. She spotted me instantly. "Oh my God," she said loudly, to no one in particular. "You're still here." Conversations around the diner faltered. Forks paused midair. My throat tightened. "Hi Lily," I said carefully. "What brings you?" She cut me off with a dismissive laugh. I was nearby and thought I'd see how the other half lives. "You look exhausted, Mom. You sure this job isn't too advanced for you?" Heat flushed my face. "Lily, please." She raised her voice even higher. "What?" "I'm just saying you look pathetic wiping tables at your age." Customers stared. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked entertained. I felt the walls closing in. Then, out of nowhere, Victor stood. It was the first time I had ever seen him rise quickly. The trembling hands, the frail posture, they vanished. He stood straighter than any man his age had the right to. His voice, when he spoke, was ice. "Enough." Lily blinked. "Excuse me." "You heard me," he said, stepping closer. "Sit down. Your mother is speaking." Lily scoffed, confused by this stranger daring to address her. "Who are you?" "Some lonely old man she's been pity-feeding." Victor's eyes sharpened. "You have no idea who I am." He reached into his coat and pulled out his phone. The same phone the man earlier had slipped a card beneath. His voice shifted lower, steadier, commanding. "It's Hale. I need a crew at Harbor Point Diner immediately. Entry Protocol 3. 3 words echoed like a warning. Seconds later, the bell rang again. 4 men in discreet tactical jackets walked in and formed a silent perimeter around the diner. Customers gasped. Lily stepped back, suddenly pale. Victor pointed directly at her. "You will not speak to your mother that way again." The room went still, and in that heavy silence, I realized Victor Hale was far more than a lonely old man with trembling hands. He was someone with power, and my daughter had just provoked him. The diner felt frozen in place, like everyone had inhaled at once and forgotten how to breathe. Lily stared at the 4 men flanking the entrance, her bravado collapsing in real time. Victor lowered his phone, his expression returning to that unsettling calm he wore so naturally. But now it carried a steel edge I had never seen before. "Mom," Lily whispered, her voice cracking. "What is going on? Who is this man?" I didn't know how to answer. Because the truth was simple and terrifying, I had no idea. Victor turned to me. His voice softened, but a quiet authority remained underneath. "Marlene, I think it's time we talked somewhere private." He gestured toward an empty booth away from the crowd. The security men remained still, a silent barrier between chaos and order. Customers whispered. But Victor acted as though he were discussing weekend plans instead of commanding a small army. Lily grabbed my arm. "Don't go with him." Victor didn't even glance her way. "She will be safe. Far safer than you are right now." Something in his tone made Lily release me instantly. I followed Victor to the booth, my heart pounding. He removed the leather notebook I had seen once before and set it on the table between us. His fingers rested on the cover. "Not trembling, not anymore. First," he said quietly, "I need to apologize. I didn't intend for the truth to come out this way. But your daughter's cruelty forced my hand." "Truth about what?" I whispered. He breathed slowly, choosing every word with care. "My name is Victor Hale. I am not retired. Not in the traditional sense. For 40 years, I built Hale Marine Technologies into one of the largest independent research firms on the West Coast. We developed coastal mapping systems, submersible guidance equipment, emergency beacon networks, things that keep people alive without them ever realizing it." My mouth fell open. I had heard of Hale Marine. Everyone in San Diego had. It was enormous, powerful, untouchable. "But 2 years ago," he continued, "after my wife died, my children tried to force me to transfer control. They called it succession planning. I called it greed." He looked down, the faintest crack of pain visible. "So I walked away. Disappeared. Let them believe I had suffered a mental decline. I wanted to see the world without money, without influence, without the filters people wear when they think you can give them something. And you came here," I whispered. "Here," he said gently, "I found you." I stared at him stunned. "From the first day you shared your lunch with me," Victor continued, "I saw a woman stripped of everything but still capable of kindness. And I began looking into your story." My stomach tightened. "Looking into?" "Yes," he said. "Your daughter and her husband didn't just trick you. They falsified documents. They buried tax records. They transferred assets into shell accounts that have no legal standing." My breath caught. "Marlene," he said softly, "what they did is criminal." I felt dizzy, gripping the table for balance. Victor leaned forward, eyes steady. "And I intend to help you reclaim every single thing they stole from you." I sat there, unable to speak, as Victor opened his leather notebook and turned it so I could see the pages. They weren't filled with ramblings or sketches like I once imagined. They were meticulous records, copies of documents, handwritten notes, dates, and highlighted lines that made my pulse quicken. The first page showed the deed to my marina. Underneath it, Victor had written one word: fraud. "This," he said quietly, tapping the corner of the paper, "was altered. The original signature block was removed and replaced. Whoever did it used a scanning pattern consistent with mid-tier imaging software. Amateur, but effective enough to fool someone grieving." I stared, horrified. "Brent handles digital forms. He told me everything was standard." Victor nodded. "Standard for someone trying to steal." He turned the page. Bank withdrawals. Transfers I had never authorized. A ledger showing inconsistent amounts routed through a holding account I didn't recognize. "What is this account?" I whispered. "A shell company," Victor replied. "They created it under the name Del Mar Advisory. It doesn't exist as a licensed entity, which means every transfer they made into it is illegal." The room felt as though it tilted sideways. I had known they betrayed me, but seeing the proof laid out, neat and undeniable, made it real in a way grief alone never had. "I don't want them arrested," I murmured, barely hearing my own voice. "They're my family." Victor's expression softened. "Family is not defined by blood. It is defined by loyalty." I wiped my eyes, but the tears kept coming. Victor continued. "My team has already begun retrieving the full data trail. We have bank logs, digital fingerprints, and enough evidence to charge them with elder exploitation, financial coercion, and falsifying property documents." I shook my head. "I don't want revenge. And you won't get revenge," he said calmly. "You will get your life back." He flipped another page. There, printed in bold letters, was something that made me gasp. Proposed sell date: 2 weeks. Under it, the name of a private buyer I had never heard of. "They're trying to sell the marina," I whispered. "They have been negotiating quietly," Victor replied. "A buyer from Sacramento. That meeting you see scheduled here? It finalizes the deal. If it goes through, reclaiming anything becomes far more complicated." I felt sick. My husband's life work, my memories, everything we built. They were carving it up like it meant nothing. I can stop the sale, Victor said. By tomorrow morning. I can freeze the transfer under suspicion of fraud. My hands trembled so violently I had to fold them in my lap. What happens to Lily? That depends on you, he answered simply. I looked at him, searching for something: mercy, direction, strength. Instead, I saw patience, and a steadiness that reminded me of someone who had walked through storms harsher than mine. I don't want to destroy her, I said shakily. I just want my life back. I want what Owen and I worked for. I want peace. Victor nodded, closing the notebook gently. Then that is exactly what we will aim for. He stood and offered me his hand. Marlene, you have been stripped of everything. Now it is time to take it all back. The next morning felt unreal, like I had stepped into someone else's life. Victor arranged everything so swiftly, it made my head spin. His team secured a meeting at the marina office, the very place Lily had stripped from me. Walking back into that building sent a sharp ache down my spine. The familiar scent of seawater and old varnished wood clung to the walls, just as it had when Owen ran it with pride. But now it felt cold. Stolen. Victor stood beside me, calm, composed, his presence radiating a quiet force that settled my nerves. Two individuals introduced as legal representatives, one from San Diego, one from Los Angeles, waited by the conference table. They nodded politely but kept a professional distance. At exactly 11:15, footsteps echoed down the hall. Lily entered with a bright, anticipatory smile, clearly expecting the private buyer. But the moment she saw me seated beside Victor, her expression collapsed. What is this?" she demanded. Victor didn't answer immediately. He gestured for her to sit. The authority in that simple motion made her obey. "Where's Mr. Carlson?" Lily asked sharply. "We have a scheduled meeting." Victor opened his leather notebook and slid a printed packet across the table toward her. "Your meeting has been postponed indefinitely." She snatched the packet, flipping through it. Confusion melted into shock. "What is this supposed to be?" "Evidence," Victor said, his tone like a calm tide hiding a strong undercurrent. "Of every fraudulent transaction, every falsified form, every duplicated signature block, every hidden account." Lily's breath stuttered. This doesn't mean." "It means exactly what it shows," Victor said. "You stole from your mother. You manipulated property deeds. You attempted to liquidate a business that never legally belonged to you." Lily turned to me with desperate eyes. "Mom, tell him he's mistaken. Tell him Brent handled the paperwork. Tell him, I know what happened," I whispered. "I know exactly what you both did." Her lips trembled. She looked suddenly much younger, much smaller. "Mom, I didn't mean, it was just easier. You were grieving. You didn't understand. We thought," Victor interrupted softly. "Greed often disguises itself as practicality." Lily's shoulders sagged. "Are you going to have us arrested?" Victor opened another document and placed it between us. "That depends on what you choose." She stared at him, horrified. "You will return every asset, every account, and every percentage of equity to your mother. You will commit to 1 year of financial ethics counseling and restricted access to her life. If you comply fully, no charges will be filed." "And if I don't?" she whispered. Victor didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Then your actions qualify for felony prosecution under California codes of elder exploitation, fraudulent transfer of property, and intentional misrepresentation. You will face trial, and prison is a possible outcome." Lily's legs buckled. She collapsed into the chair, tears spilling down her cheeks in shaking waves. "Mom, please," she choked out. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." For the first time, I saw the fear in her eyes, not fear of Victor, but fear of what she had become. I reached across the table and touched her trembling hand. "Then sign," I said gently. "And let's start again." Her hand shook violently as she picked up the pen. And with a long, broken sob, she signed my life back to me. 6 months passed, and life slowly stitched itself back together in ways I never expected. The marina was legally mine again. I spent mornings unlocking the office just as Owen once did, breathing in the scent of salt water and fresh paint after Victor quietly funded renovations. I didn't ask how much he spent, he didn't volunteer the information. It felt like he was restoring a part of me that had been ripped away. Lily kept her word. She attended counseling, held a modest job, and respected every boundary. Our relationship remained fragile, like touching glass that might crack under too much pressure, but at least it was real. Brent, on the other hand, packed his things and moved out of state. I didn't mourn the loss. Victor visited the marina often. Sometimes with coffee. Sometimes with news from his legal team. Sometimes just to sit on the old dock in comfortable silence. He seemed lighter, more grounded, as though shedding his hidden life had allowed him to breathe. But there was still something unresolved: his children. One warm afternoon, as I sat at my desk sorting through new rental contracts, a knock sounded on the door. I assumed it was Victor. Instead, a tall woman stepped in, wearing a pressed navy blazer and a guarded expression. "I'm looking for Marlene Hayes," she announced. "That would be me." She studied me with cool, sharp eyes. "I'm Charlotte Hale." My pulse spiked. The daughter Victor said barely spoke to him. Before I could respond, she continued, "I want to understand why my father is rearranging his entire estate. Why a woman he's known for less than a year suddenly has influence over decisions that were once family matters." The accusation in her tone stung more than I expected. "I'm not influencing him," I said softly. "Victor makes his own choices." Charlotte's jaw tightened. "He updated his estate plan. He assigned new beneficiaries. He restructured the inheritance my brother and I were supposed to receive. And all of this happened after he met you." I felt my breath catch. I hadn't known he made changes. He'd mentioned intentions. Possibilities, not that anything had been finalized. Before I could answer, the door opened again. Victor stepped inside, holding 2 coffees, and froze at the sight of his daughter. "Charlotte," he said quietly. She turned on him. "Why her? Why replace your children with a stranger? Do not raise your voice to me," Victor said. But there was hurt behind his firmness. "I replaced no one. I simply chose to give value where value was given to me." Charlotte scoffed. "And what did she give you?" Victor set the coffees down and looked at her with a pain so raw it silenced the room. "She gave me kindness," he said. "The one thing my own children have not offered in years." Charlotte's eyes filled with anger and something deeper. Something that looked like denial cracking. "That's not fair," she whispered. "We stayed away because you shut us out. You told us nothing. You disappeared. And when I grieved your mother," Victor said softly, "you saw only my vulnerability, not my humanity. You wanted control, not connection." Charlotte flinched. He continued, "Marlene is not taking anything from you. She is simply the person who showed up when you didn't." Silence pressed heavily on the room. Finally, Charlotte's voice trembled. "Is it too late?" Victor's shoulders softened. "Not if you're willing to rebuild honestly." For the first time, Charlotte's facade broke. She nodded stiffly, wiping her eyes. "Then, show me where to start," she whispered. Victor reached out a hand. She hesitated, then took it. That afternoon, the 3 of us sat on the dock, feet dangling over the water as the sun dipped low on the horizon. No accusations, no shouting. Just quiet breaths and small beginnings. And for the first time, I watched Victor's fractured family take a step toward healing, not through wealth or power, but through something far simpler: truth. In the months that followed, peace returned to my life in small, steady waves, gentle at first, then strong enough to carry me somewhere new. For the first time since Owen's passing, mornings no longer felt heavy. I woke before sunrise, brewed my own coffee, and walked along the marina docks, as if reclaiming the familiarity of my former world. Each plank under my feet reminded me that I had survived the kind of loss that breaks people down to dust. And somehow, from that dust, something unexpected had bloomed. Victor and I never labeled what grew between us. It wasn't romance, though there was deep affection. It wasn't just friendship, though it had started that way. It was a partnership of 2 people who had been broken by those who should have loved them most, and who had chosen, quietly and carefully, to build something stronger out of the ruins. He often joined me on those early walks. Sometimes he brought pastries from a bakery near his new townhouse. Sometimes he brought stories from his meetings with Charlotte and Mason, who were slowly, cautiously rebuilding their relationships with him. They had begun to understand that their father had not abandoned them. He had stepped away because he needed to see who they were when he could give them nothing. One morning, as the sun painted gold across the water, Victor handed me an envelope. Not heavy, not formal, simple, almost humble. "This is for you," he said. I opened it carefully. Inside was a document stating that I now held partial ownership in a new community program he had launched, the Hale Marina Initiative, dedicated to supporting widows, seniors, and small family businesses at risk of financial exploitation. This is your story, he said softly, turned into something that will protect others. Emotion tightened my throat. Victor, I don't deserve this. He smiled gently. You deserve more than you think. You kept your heart open when every reason told you to close it. We sat together on the edge of the dock as fishing boats hummed out into the harbor. A seagull landed a few feet away, bold and curious. Life felt simple again, not perfect, but honest. Lily and I now met for lunch twice a month. She struggled with shame and guilt, but she was trying, really trying. And while trust didn't return overnight, I could see pieces of the daughter I once knew resurfacing. She brought me flowers sometimes. She asked questions about my day. She apologized not just once, but repeatedly, in ways that showed she understood the magnitude of her choices. One afternoon, she slipped her hand into mine and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Those words mattered more than anything she had signed. As I sit here now, telling you my story, I realize something important. We do not get to choose the betrayals life hands us. We do not get to choose who breaks our hearts. But we do get to choose what we become after the breaking. And sometimes, the family we build out of compassion, accountability, and truth becomes far stronger than the one we lost. Now I'm curious, what would you have done in my place? Have you ever rebuilt yourself after someone you loved hurt you deeply? Share where you're watching from. And stay with me, I've left 2 powerful stories on the final screen that will take your breath away. Looking back now, I finally understand that life doesn't fall apart to punish us. Sometimes it collapses so we can see who truly stands with us when the dust settles. I lost the home I built, the savings I worked decades for, and the children I thought would protect me in my old age. But in that empty space, I found something far more valuable. The courage to rebuild myself and the wisdom to recognize genuine kindness. I learned that family isn't defined by blood, but by the people who choose to honor your worth. Justice may come slowly, but it arrives with a clarity that heals. And above all, I discovered that even after betrayal, your heart can open again stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than before. Now I want to hear from you. What lesson did you take from my story? And you're watching from which city?